feel free to pop into the chat and say hi. This is our fourth NATS.io community office hours. So, we do this on a weekly basis. We'll pull some Synadians in that work on various things, various kind of open source NATS projects, as well as our commercial ones. And I'm going to wait a few minutes for people to kind of pour in, and then we'll kick things off with our agenda today. I'm Jeremy, by the way. And I'm going to go real quick, check to make sure that we are streaming properly. Let's see if we got anything. Okay, I think we're good on the live front. If you're joining us from social, hello, welcome. This is our NATS Community Office Hours number 4. We are actually doing a live Q&A as well, so you can pop into the chat and I should hopefully receive it. And answer your questions. If you want to be a bit more interactive, you could join us on Zoom and have a more interactive experience there as well. And I'm going to go ahead and quickly configure a couple more things before we continue, which would be more around, let's see, I'm still figuring out how to do this whole Zoom thing, so just be patient with me. Okay, I think we're good. Let's go ahead and pull in our guest for today, who is Seth Back. He works on the Synadia Cloud and platform teams here at Synadia, and he'll be able to kind of fill us in on some really cool things happening on the Synadia Cloud and platform front, as well as just some other kind of neat projects that he's been working on as well. So I'm going to go ahead and ask Seth to come in. I think he's backstage right now. Oh, you can't hear me? Let's see. Let's see if I can pull in Seth from backstage. Can everybody hear me all right? Folks in the chat? Okay. Okay, Sergio, he raised his hand. I think it means that he could hear me all right. Folks can hear me on Twitch, which is great. All right, cool. So I'm going to go ahead and try to grab Seth from backstage, and I will be right back. Okay, and we are back. Hey, Seth, how's it going? Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, no problem. Sorry, I was backstage and somehow Zoom crashed and then I couldn't hear you. And so,
Oh, no.
Typical things. It's not even a Monday.
No problem. So, yeah, thanks for joining us today for this office hours. We're going to have some questions from people, but we also have an agenda that we're going to go over today because there's a lot of updates kind of that have happened in the couple weeks in the NATS world. And so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and then we'll kind of go from there. So I'm going to grab this. Ooh, okay, I already have Synadia Cloud up. That's great. Cool. So we have a little bit of an agenda, but this is more freeform. We're going to just spend the next hour or so answering any questions that you may have and then going over the news for today. But we'll talk about all things NATS and distributed systems. Feel free to literally ask anything, and we'll try to get to as many questions as we can. So let's just go over some news of some recent releases within the past couple weeks. First and foremost, a new version of NATS Exporter was released. So for those of you who don't know what NATS Exporter is, it's our Prometheus exporter, and that kind of plays nicely together with our NATS Surveyor, which is also a Prometheus exporter but does things in some slightly different ways. So we just have another fix that couple fixes that came in. Very, very minor, but if you are using NATS Exporter, if you don't even know what NATS Exporter is, you might want to go ahead and check that out. But we did land some fixes there, so very minor change. One of the other really cool things that's kind of been brewing over the past couple months, and Tomasz and a couple other folks on the team have been doing a really good job putting this together, is our NATS Swift client. So we've been getting a lot of just interest and demand for people wanting to, even though NATS was really designed for microservices and things like that to communicate with each other, we've been getting a lot more demand for people wanting to do stuff on mobile. And certainly I love doing like NATS on the front end with JavaScript. And I've really for a while now wanted to start building some mobile support for some of my apps that I've been working on. So if you are working in Swift or you have teams that are working in Swift, we now do have an official NATS Swift client, and that's gotten some, some new releases. There's still more support that we need to build in for it, but I know the team is looking for feedback. So those of you who do have Swift projects and want to kind of integrate NATS with that, this might be a really good thing to start playing with. We also, built this Swift client to, use a lot of the more modern technologies for Swift, as well as, supporting things like, pause and resume and sleep and wake up on devices. And so this would be a really, really fun project to play with. Seth, do you have any iOS apps that you have just lying around?
Ah, no, let's see. Last time I did any Objective-C or Swift was a long time ago. So no iOS apps just lying around that I would love to integrate apps with, but that's not to say I shouldn't go out and build one now. So yeah.
Yep. Speaking of clients, Nicholas asks, how is progress with the implementation of the micro framework for more clients, Python, for example? Yeah, I mean, I don't think we've necessarily prioritized the Python micro library. I'm not sure what's on everybody's plate right now. It's something we would love to maybe collaborate on if somebody is a Pythonista and would like to kind of help implement the micro framework. It's not a terribly large amount of work to implement, and it's fairly well specified at this point. And so, reach out to the team over NATS Slack, and we'd love to kind of collaborate. I know some of our favorite things to do, as much as we like to, maintain our clients and everything like that, we love when folks from the community can come in and say, hey, how can I help move this forward? And we can kind of collaborate on that. I know that's happened with our, C# library, which we'll cover in just a sec. There's been an enormous community effort to really help bring that in. And since we do have something well specified, we'll try to get around to it, but obviously we're all very, very busy Synadians trying to continue to work on various things. So probably the best way to help get something prioritized would be to to see how you can help and kind of chat with the team about that. Great question. I got a confirmation that chat is disabled, unfortunately. So let me see how I can enable that again. Apologies for that. Let me bring up the chat. Not sure why that gets disabled. Here we go. Chat with everyone. Okay. Everybody who is here, you can now try to go chat with us. Okay, cool. We got chat. Hey, everybody. We have chat inside of Zoom. Okay, thank you. Cool. We can now talk together. All right. So let's go over kind of the next bit of release. We have a new kind of early release of NEX as well. So for those of you who don't know what NEX is, NEX stands for the NATS Execution Engine, and it is kind of our experimental. We're investing a lot of time and energy into making kind of a way to run workloads alongside NATS in a very, very simple way. And so a lot of the use cases we're focused on in terms of NEX are around how do we run things at the edge? How do we run things in a very lightweight way, as sort of kind of like a lightweight alternative to an orchestrator like Kubernetes. And NEX at its core is very kind of imperative. And it's meant to be that way. It's meant to be more of a primitive of I have, NEX running on a machine, and I can go tell that machine to go, run this binary, or eventually run this OCI image, or run this serverless function. And it's very simple in that way. We plan to invest even more on kind of creating a more declarative way of doing so. And Seth, you kind of have been in a little bit of conversations with that as well for Synadia platform and Synadia Cloud. Do you want to talk a little bit about we don't want to promise anything, obviously, but what are some of our early thoughts and conversations that we've had around running workloads?
Yeah, I mean, I think kind of what you said, the declarative aspect of it is really important. The idea that you can, you can be able to describe how you want a workload run and where you want it run and those types of things, and then have sort of NEX and then the parts of NEX that are going to be integrated into platform and hopefully eventually cloud, and just go do the right thing for you, right? Say, hey, I want to run this workload on this cluster or in this region. I want it to, do these types of things. And that's really all you have to do, right? So you don't have to worry about interacting with the underlying infrastructure, how it's going to be run, where it's going to be run, all of those types of things. So I think what we're in the early stages of doing right now is figuring out how to tie all of that together in kind of a smooth, easy to use, right, very user friendly way. I mean, I'm assuming if you all have played around with Next, it's super, like the dev tooling around it. I know Kevin and team have spent a lot of time figuring out like, hey, how can we make this really easy to just when I'm in my dev cycles and then moving it eventually into, pushing it into a production kind of environment, how can I make sure that that's an easy, user-friendly, smooth experience?
Yeah.
And they've done an amazing job. And so we're trying to now say, okay, how do we take that same experience and then bring it out into part of Synadia platform and then other areas as well. So
Yep.
yeah, I mean, I think there's lots of options, right? NATS has all the primitives under the hood, whether it's the KV or the micro framework and all of those types of things that are just kind of baked into NATS to do service discovery, configuration, all of that type of stuff. So that's what we're doing right now, is putting all that together. But
Yeah,
yeah,
that's kind of the really neat thing, and part of a lot of our investment and thought and conversations with users and with customers has been like folks are kind of asking like how can we use more NATs? How can we we're either using NATs for pub sub or request reply, or we're using it for stream processing, and we want to start using KV, or we want to start using like more of the micro framework, the microservices, and one of the big conversations or really requests that we've had is like what's an easy way to run workloads, because everything NATS makes so many things simple, and when you have all of these other components like discovery and and the KV and all, like you can kind of put the pieces together and have something, a very very kind of simple but powerful workload management tool. And so yeah, you can write a service like this, like you'd write any other NAT service, and then you could just go ahead and run it, which is just really cool. So Next makes all of that possible. And you should definitely check it out. It's early days, but one of the things I wanted to kind of make apparent with this release for Next, and this is something that we kind of played with when we were all at KubeCon in Europe, is Next is built on Firecracker. And I know if anybody had experience trying to play with Next, early without a Linux box, that getting virtualization working with Firecracker can be difficult. And so we actually
challenge.
created a more of like a non-sandbox mode support for that in these more recent releases that could really kind of help you run something in less of a security sandbox, but allow you to kind of run it on a Mac OS machine or things like that. And it also makes a lot more sense when you need to have like specific access to hardware. So one of the reasons we did this while I was at KubeCon was because I was doing a demo that was on a Jetson Orin Nano, and which needs access to the GPU and everything like that. And so oh yeah, thanks Jordan for linking in the chat. We do have a no sandbox mode supported now. And this is great if you need access to hardware, if you don't necessarily need the strict isolation. If you're building a platform and you're trying to run a bunch of workloads next to each other, of course, you're going to want that isolation. You're going to want to maybe make some choices in your cloud instances that support virtualization, but you could totally run these workloads without Firecracker now. And that's great for development use. It's great for like I said, if you need specific access to hardware that Firecracker doesn't necessarily support yet, you can now do this. And so this is definitely it's a really really good time to play with Next these days, because you can now do it on a lot more supported hardware. So that's awesome. So go check out Next. I think that's a really fun library to play with. Once again, if you're just joining us now, feel free to ask questions either in the chat or in our Q&A for Zoom. We are kind of running this over Zoom, so if you want to, if you want to ask us questions for the Q&A, probably Zoom's the best way to join us. But feel free to jump into the chat. I'll try to look at the chat for our various socials for all of those as well. All right. Sergio, with regards to Next, says, looking forward to the updates on OCI image running. Yes, we are too. I think that will be really well received. Everybody uses containers these days. It would be nice if everything was elf binaries, but not everything is. So yeah, the OCI image stuff is going to be really, really nice to have. Okay. So we also have a new NATS.js release. that got released that Alberta released a couple weeks ago. Improved stuff for KV watchers in terms of reliability, and supporting multiple filters for KV watchers in history, which actually I have been using already, which is great. So if you are using NATS WebSockets, NATS Dino, or NATS JS, and you wanted some of these features, this would be a really, really good one to look into as well. Um, Okay, back to another client library, nats.net. So for those of you who don't know, I guess within the past 6 to 8 months, Zia, if you're on here, I'm sure you can clarify for me too. We have been Zia has been putting so much work into our .NET client libraries, and they've just been getting so good. So if anybody is, maybe on an older version of a .NET library, or things like that, and doesn't know about this newer one that has come very recently, the ergonomics of it are so nice, and I feel like the updates have just been coming very, very quickly. And so definitely check that out. I feel like we now have just a very excellent .NET client that's been working. Yeah, okay, yeah. Zia says we've been working hard on the new .NET 8 plus support. So yeah, go ahead and check that out. I'm sure we would love more feedback on this for all of you .NET fans, on how we can continue to make this .NET client even better. Okay, and then after the so Zia says in the chat, there's been lots of high quality kind of community contributions around the .NET client, and I kind of said this in the beginning. That's like a perfect example of where I feel like the community's really come together. And we as Synadia, I think we have a lot of great polyglots at the company working on multiple clients and multiple languages. But honestly, the best type of thing that we can ask for is for the community to come in and help us make the most idiomatic version of the client library. There's really like two ways that you can create client libraries, right? You can try to create client libraries that are all uniform and never idiomatic to any language. But I think one thing that I really liked, and what I gravitated toward for NATS, is that while we have a lot of the same concepts and we try to solidify those, things like streams and consumers and pull requests and all of these things, that all of the clients are idiomatic. I'm curious, Seth, what you feel like about that, and if you had kind of the same impression like jumping into NATS years ago.
Yeah, no, I think that was it felt very natural to connect and use NATS, and even just like with the .NET client. I guess my last gig, I was working at a company that was all .NET based, and we used the .NET client. That was a couple of years ago now, but yeah, it fits with the language, and I appreciate that. There's been other software that I've used where it's kind of written very clearly for one kind of paradigm, and then everything else kind of shoehorned into it, and so it doesn't feel natural. But yeah, I mean, I've used it across several languages now, and like my experience with it has always been the people that are in kind of heading up the different client libraries at Synadia are very interested in making sure they feel comfortable and idiomatic in the language.
Yep.
So yeah, it's always been a good experience. I liked that a lot about the NATS client. I mean, honestly, when I first started, it was mostly in Go, and so that was probably kind of cheating, since NATS server is written in Go, so it all kind of fit anyways. But as I branched out and had a chance to use other clients, it definitely I had that same experience. So
Yeah, it's good. And so I would encourage anybody, who wants to jump in and be a part of this community. One of the ways that you could really help contribute, because I know it can get a little bit overwhelming as to like, what should I, work on? It seems like the NAT server is like, solid, and all the issues that we're working through are very hard issues. So I think one of the best things you could do is, if you have a certain mastery over a language, figuring out ways to contribute to the client libraries, and continue to drive idioms. Obviously, like, we want to continue to support backwards compatibility, so we can't just change things on a whim. But the more we can get community collaboration on bringing idioms into the client libraries, the better. So I think that'll be really, really nice.
It really is a great way too to kind of dig into more of the internals of what's going on in the clients too, right? I mean, you get a pretty fairly quickly, you get a pretty deep knowledge of, like, how does KV work, and how does, the streams work, and JavaScript, like what's going on under the hood in the clients. So if you want to kind of up your game with interacting with NATS, right? Even just apart from the CLI and stuff, digging into a client library and how it actually ticks is a good way to do that.
Absolutely. One other thing that I want to mention, and this will probably be something I'll try to showcase in a future office hours, but we have well, I can actually draw it because I think this would be a little bit more interesting. So obviously we have like the NATS server over here as a project. And then branching out from that, we have, a bunch of other GitHub repos that represent the various clients. And the client libraries, there is a whole decision-making process around our client libraries and how they fit in feature-wise, and how we get parity with all of those. And we really do our best to try to manage that well. Sometimes things slip through the cracks and stuff like that. And we have to also wrestle with getting the client libraries to language parity. But one of the things that we've wanted to create for a while, and that we're, getting very close to release on, is this idea of orbit libraries. So these other kind of repos, you could think of them like a contrib repo of sorts, but these orbit libraries that might, that don't need to have support for every language, but that are, that provide extra functionality. So imagine that you have, like a middleware, imagine that we start supporting middleware inside of like, all these client libraries like Python and Go and Python and Go and JS and C#. We don't have all Python libraries, but you know what I mean. Go and C# and JavaScript and whatever other ones that we have. Imagine that we put like a middleware layer in here, and then we want to be able to support multiple middlewares. Well, we don't want to necessarily say every middleware we support has to be supported across all the clients. Instead, we want to invite community support for different types of middleware. So maybe somebody wants to build, a logging middleware for Python. They can do that and contribute to the Orbit library so that other kind of Python developers can benefit from that. And so if you're ever thinking like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we had something higher level, even on top of micro, that does stuff like parsing arguments, or, the parsing out the wildcards automatically, or doing, tracing with middleware. If you ever thought of building these higher level abstractions that you could share as a library, this is kind of where the idea of like Orbit comes in. So you'll be hearing more from us on this idea of like on the open source side of like Orbit libraries. And so stay tuned for that. And we'd like to know from the community what kinds of higher level helpful utilities or libraries for NATS you'd like to kind of help contribute to these Orbit libraries. We'd love to have feedback on that. So.
Super interesting. Right. I built a logging and middleware and sort of a routing library on top of the micro framework. So
yeah, I think many of us have. And it's like, can't somebody just build one?
Yeah.
So I think that's going to be really helpful, and I'm excited for us to continue to play with that. Okay, this one, Seth, I feel like you have a lot that you can talk about with regards to this, which is Synadia Control Plane 1.4 release. So for those of you who don't know how kind of Synadia's products work, and I'm not going to just try to talk about our products the entire time, but I think there's some really cool stuff that might be worth looking at here. But the way Synadia's products work in general is that we have two kind of main products. We have Synadia Cloud and Synadia Platform. And the cool part about this is that this is actually like the same code base, essentially. The way you could think about this is, imagine you have GitHub. If GitHub is, the place for Git at this point, the centralized place, some of you guys might use GitLab or whatever. And then there's like GitHub Enterprise, which has evolved over the years. But, GitHub Enterprise was kind of like this. I host it inside of my own, company intranet or VPC or whatever, because I have like compliance and I need to keep my data, in my own place. You can kind of think of like Synadia Cloud and Synadia Platform as that, and these are still the same code base. And so, in a sense, like Synadia Cloud is really like a Synadia platform on top of what we call NGS, which is our NATS kind of global super cluster, right? And then cloud kind of just like supports all of that. So in a sense, we are like dog fooding our Synadia platform by running cloud on NGS. So if you go to cloud.synadia.com, like over here, and you sign up for it, it's a free sign up. You can play with NATS and not have to host it. It's multi-tenant. It's this gigantic supercluster. That's great. You're going to get this same kind of experience on cloud as you would if you were to run your own. Essentially, you were to run your own cloud, which would be Synadia platform. So hopefully that makes sense. Just describing our products, and we're going to do a much better job like talking about this on our website and stuff like that. But so when you see an update for Synadia platform, eventually a lot of these things will make their way over to Synadia Cloud as well in some way, shape, or form, likely. Never a guarantee, but of course, that's kind of the intention. Is we want kind of a parity between these two platforms, because we want people to be able to kind of jump in and play with cloud and say like, oh, this was a cool experience, and maybe they want that experience, but they have certain you might have certain like restrictions or compliance reasons why you can't use Synadia Cloud, and Synadia platform is like maybe a good conversation to have. And so that's kind of the general idea and gist behind how we want to continue to support customers with products around NATS. And feel free to jump in and give us feedback on that. We'd love to kind of hear more about it. But Synadia Control Plane was released, which will kind of bring updates to Synadia Cloud eventually as well. You want to talk about some of these things?
Yeah.
Steph?
Yeah, no, that'd be great. Also, I'd plug as far as feedback. There was I guess, a community survey that was sent out a couple of weeks ago. I think it's closed for now, but it was basically asking like how you deploy NATS and run NATS, and how would you use something like cloud versus platform to sort of control and manage your cluster. So if you have thoughts or feedback or ideas, definitely let us know, because we are trying to gather data, obviously, and be responsive to how the community is using these things, and that will definitely guide our design, our feature list, and decisions on what gets implemented when and how and all that. So yeah, feedback super important. But yeah, for the sort of the platform release, again, they're essentially the same code bases for cloud and platform, which is makes it nice and also somewhat challenging in certain situations. But it's great because we can run the same code base across managing a gigantic globally distributed supercluster, and that will work. And so it definitely will work for on-prem and whatever you're actually deploying and using it for locally. But I think service accounts was a big that was a big push that we put into the new 1.4 release, and it's essentially with platform, we tried to. Platform has its own API, so I'm not sure in Synadia Cloud. If you log into Synadia Cloud, you can actually get API tokens and interact against Synadia Cloud. We have an open API spec and some great documentation there, but it abstracts some of the things that you need to do for like cross-account stream sharing, which can be complex just under the hood for NATS. And so you're able to download personal access tokens and then interact through our CLI or even our client library directly with the control plane API, and then able to manipulate, ultimately it ends up as NATS primitives, whether it's accounts or users or streams or shares, but you do it through the cloud API. And that just enables you to do things like cross-account stream sharing. If you have two accounts, control plane will handle those types of shares for you and make sure that everything is matched up correctly, so you don't have to go in and do it individually. So with service accounts, the idea is if you don't want to have a personal access token to access the API, but you want to deploy it either as part of maybe a deployment pipeline, or you have some other automation tasks that you want to do, and you want to be able to manipulate NATS or control plane via those types of programmatic access. That's what service accounts are. Essentially think of it as personal access token that you kind of use with the CLI versus like a token that I can store and then use in like a pipeline or other types of things. So you can have all the same types of permissions and add, the permissioning that's all done around users. It can all be done around service accounts as well. So we had multiple requests for that.
Yeah.
just for people that were using control plane on-prem. And
So,
so
so
yeah.
yeah, I want to talk to that a little bit because I think
Mhm.
that's service accounts are really interesting because one of the things we wanted to create with like cloud and platform is this idea of kind of scriptability. So think about it this way: if you're using like open source tools right now, let's say you're doing like JWT based auth. And right now, the open source way to manage that is through NSC, right? And NSC requires that you have a place to you store your tokens and stuff like that. And so common feedback that we've been hearing from companies that have adopted NSC is they eventually get to this point where they want to start building out a platform inside of their organization. And they have like this one box that's like running NSC on it, and keeping all of those tokens safe and everything like that. And they just and then they might run scripts on this box and stuff like that. But every time certain teams then want to get access to like the NATS cluster for whatever reason and get onboarded, like it's just that one team that's running the whole NSC box is like becoming a bottleneck, right? And so the idea behind platform is, what it will, so, while the decentralized auth gives us so much flexibility, a lot of people are asking for some sort of central location. Think about it like the whole, why people want GitHub, even though Git is decentralized, right? And so like you have Synadia Cloud or Synadia Platform as like this kind of centralized place. And while you can grant users accounts so they can like log in and get their credentials or whatever, you can also have this idea of the whole like service account, where this might just be not a human, but a machine that's doing some form of automation. So you can, write your own kind of, scripting and applications that act against this more centralized, REST API. And I know, Seth,
Mhm.
like we've worked on some tools that have been using the REST API, and we'd
Mhm.
love to continue to ship more tools like a CLI where people can actually do more of that kind of scripting stuff without having to build full applications around the REST API, right?
Yeah. There's definitely a CLI, but it has mostly right now it has limited functionality. It was designed around, as we moved from the old NGS sort of way the NGS managed accounts into Synadia Cloud. It was designed around, how do you import those accounts? How do you, make changes around bringing the accounts over? So a lot of the functionality in the CLI is all about systems and accounts. But we do have an SDK. It's Golang right now, but we it's being generated off of our open API spec that you can basically bring in to your application and get sort of functions that you're able to just call against if you're writing your own program or you're scripting or whatever, that you can just write against the platform and cloud API. So our goal is to kind of expand that so that as you're using cloud and as you're using platform, we want to give you the tools to be able to use that very easily, in whatever language, if you want to embed it directly, or via the CLI if you're going to use it,
Yeah.
in that sort of capacity. But
And
otherwise, it's just a straight REST API. So you can also curl it as well. So
yep. And just some kind of like use cases for like why people would want to do this. Like things like, you might have a process where you're adding or provisioning teams or users, signing keys, the automatic rotation of signing keys, which we have full support for. But if you want to script that around a particular company process, that's feedback that we've gotten. Managing imports and exports and permissions and sharing streams, KVs, and object stores between accounts. If those are like, big, you know, platform style things that you want, this is why service accounts come real and handy for that kind of stuff. So
and I will say, yeah, just the stream sharing, having worked on that both in platform and then also done it prior to using NSC. If you've ever tried to do stream sharing or cross account stream sharing with NSC, it's definitely a multiple step process where you have to get both imports on both accounts and you have to make sure everything matches up correctly. Part of the idea with cloud and platform was to smooth all of that friction away. It's literally an API call. You can invite somebody to a stream and they can accept it, and then you've got cross account stream sharing. So it's a super, we spend a lot of work trying to make that very, very easy. And so that's, another reason why this becomes,
super cool.
Yeah.
Super cool. Yeah. And so we'll talk more about this. But if anybody is interested in building out like a platform at their job, talk to us about Synadia Cloud or Synadia Platform. I know some people ask, Angela's asked like, what's the price of Synadia control plane or Synadia Platform? it's good to have a conversation with us about it. I wish we could just put a static price on it, but that's what Synadia Cloud is there for. Is it's kind of that SaaS for for folks. It's hard to price NATS stuff because we have people who want to like run NATS in toothbrushes, and then people who want to like run NATS on factory floors, and we can't necessarily just say like here's the price for it. So have a conversation with us. We try to make things as equitable as possible and reasonable as possible for your business use case. So do let us know. Okay, let's move on to some of the other cool updates that are happening in Synadia Cloud/platform. Let's go back to here. Native NAT server support. Yeah, you want to tell us a little bit of the story behind this?
Yeah. So that's that was actually a big one too. So we when we first launched Control Plane, the idea was there were certain things we wanted to do or features we wanted to provide that NAT server didn't necessarily give us hooks into providing natively. So we launched at the same time we launched something called Synadia Server, and that's where you see down below the Synadia Server deprecation. But essentially what it was the NATS server. And if you've never done this, and you'd like to play around with it, I encourage you to try. NATS server can be embedded very, very easily into other Go programs. Like it's embedding it and using it. In fact, we even in Control Plane, we have an internal NATS server that we just embed into our larger platform and use it to do internal messaging. But what we did with Synadia Server was we essentially wrapped an agent around Synadia Server and then ran those in the same process, essentially. Well, NATS server ran, and then the agent ran, and then we were able to use the agent to kind of provide augment some of the features that we wanted in Control Plane. But the feedback we got was that, from customers was that, well, they have already deployed NATS server to their infrastructure. And while Synadia Server was a drop-in replacement for NATS server, it was still this like, well, we have to update, we have to do a rolling deploy, we have to change our infrastructure, all of those sorts of things. And so the native connect is the answer to that. Essentially, we removed the requirement to have the agent, which would essentially manage the connection between Control Plane and the NATS, your internal NATS server and infrastructure. And now Control Plane will just directly connect to your NATS infrastructure, assuming it has access to it. That's one of the things that we did do with the agent, or one of the functions of the agent was to say, what if your NAT server is private, right? It's on a private VPC, it's not accessible, but you still want to access it with Control Plane. You still want to give Control Plane the ability to manage it, but you don't want to open it up to the world. And the agent handled tunneling, essentially, basically punching through whatever firewalls that you might have to be able to get to Control Plane where it was hosted, and then creating a secure way for us to basically just send, NATS protocol messages to the server without exposing it to the internet. So that's kind of the history of what we were trying to accomplish with it. And so we have essentially that got broken out into two things. We have native support for NATS connections. So now if you're running Control Plane and it can directly access your NATS server infrastructure, you don't need any intermediaries. Control Plane will, or Synadia platform will directly connect to your NATS server. If you still have that situation where Synadia platform or Control Plane is running somewhere that cannot get direct access to your NAT server, we now have this private link, which is essentially the agent that used to be kind of embedded in Synadia server. We just separated that out, and it runs as a separate process, and it can then basically proxy connections from your Synadia platform, your Control Plane, to your actual physical NAT servers. So really what the update did was kind of break out what was combined in Synadia server, the agent and the NATS server, separate those out, and then allow direct connection. So that was, it was a surprising amount of work to kind of not untangle things, but we had definitely tried to bundle a lot of functionality into the agent. Like, we were able to make some assumptions about where the agent's connecting from and the security of the connections and all those types of things that we had to kind of rethink through when we broke that out. But on the other hand, it was easy in the sense that it was mostly just breaking those pieces apart and then making sure they all kind of could be deployed and run separately.
Right.
But yeah, that's kind of the long history. I don't know if that was too much backstory, but that was kind of the long story behind. We went one direction, we got feedback from the community, and then pivoted and changed, which again just goes back to, if you have feedback, definitely send it along, because we
Yep.
That's That's what we want to make sure that we are meeting your needs with the software that we're deploying, because that's what we're here to do. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So the way this kind of works is that you have Synadia and right now this is supported on Synadia control plane, which is part of our Synadia platform product. But we eventually want to bring this support to Synadia Cloud in the future, potentially, depending on demand, community feedback. That's something we'd love to hear from all y'all as well. Is like, would you be interested in having Synadia Cloud kind of be your dashboard, but still running your own private NAT server, in there? We'd love to have conversations about what that looks like. But yeah, this is kind of the overall architecture where it's like if your NAT server is publicly accessible over the internet, like you can connect your Synadia platform to it, or if these are running essentially in the same, if you're running Synadia platform in the same network, if it can access it, then yeah, you're golden. You could just connect it directly to a NAT server. Otherwise, you're going to want to use this private link process to kind of to sync it up. So very cool.
Yeah, the private link really, it depends on your topology, but even if you're most even small NATS deployments will be an R3 with different availability zones, but once you start breaking out of that, depending on how you're linking your VPCs and whatnot, you eventually will be running platform somewhere where it can't access all of your NAT servers, and that's what private link is for. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Oh, that's a really good point. Yeah. If you're going cross cloud, if you're going out into the edge, stuff like that, private link is going to come in clutch. Okay. Yeah. Very cool. Very, very cool stuff. Let's kind of go back. I guess the last bit would be for the release would be kind of stream viewer and KV viewer. So like I'm going to fire this up and we can talk through some of this, which I think is cool. And sorry, we're talking so much about Synadia Cloud. If you guys do have questions, we can answer them. And actually, I'll answer some questions that came up right a while ago. For next services, will there be a possibility of a timer or schedule for services similar to a systems service? I don't have an official answer for that. Jordan or anybody on the next team, if you are in the chat, feel free to pipe up. Are we going to have any kind of like support for some sort of cron inside of next, or is that a higher level construct that it sounds like a more of a higher level construct that's more declarative, right? You say I want this thing to run on these nodes or these labels every certain amount of time, but I'd love to get confirmation from the next team on that. So good question. Okay, I have another question that I want to service before I jump back into Synadia Cloud, which I think I copied here. Here we go. Alexander from YouTube asks, would streams be internally auto-partitioned up and down in future versions of NATS? And so this is a good question, and I'm not sure if I'm going to give you the exact right answer, because we have partitioning can mean quite a few things. Are you partitioning for writes, or are you partitioning for ordered reads? That's going to make a huge difference. But one of the things that we do have on kind of the ordered reads front, and what I mean by that is like, are we going to partition messages so that certain amounts of messages or certain messages that come in, are going to be able to be read by the same consuming client, so that we could have like these ordered reads, and we could scale out horizontally. The answer is yes, we do have that coming very soon in the next version of NAT server with this, with our kind of version of consumer groups. And so in a future episode, I'll talk more about that. I know last week we had Jean-Noel Moyne on, and he's been kind of the driver for that functionality. And when it's ready to talk about, we will absolutely be talking about it. But Alexander, thanks for piping this question up. I know it's a common one that we get a lot. The short answer is if I think I know what you're talking about, it's going to be in the next version of NAT server, which will be really, really awesome to have. Okay, cool. Back over to Synadia Cloud and KV and Stream Viewer. If you ever wanted to have a UI around kind of viewing your stream or viewing your KV buckets, it's here in Synadia Cloud now. So Synadia Cloud's, again, free. If you want to just play with having a globally available supercluster and stuff like that, you could jump in right now. And this is what kind of the preview for a Stream Viewer looks like. So I can have my subjects, I can click into them. I can, format this stuff as JSON and look at the payload. I can look at any headers that may have come in. There's no headers here. But I could also format it in various various formats, and based off of community feedback, you know, if you have stuff that's in like proto or whatever, we'd love to continue to support like showing you the data, you know, in the most optimal way. But you can filter all this stuff by a particular subject. So, you know, these are all metrics, and so if I wanted to kind of filter by, you know, everything that's coming off of this node, for instance, metrics in AZ Europe West, I could simply put in a NAT subject here and filter by all those values, which is really, really cool. I could filter by a start sequence number. We have all sequence IDs here. I could filter by a start date, a start time. And I even have this cool live mode, which I don't have any data coming in here right now, but you can kind of, you know, see your messages coming in live, which I think is a really, really cool feature. This same kind of experience also just landed for our KV. So you can jump into, I don't really have a lot of data here, but I have this little KV for one of my AI demos where I have like a model name, and you can see this is just a string, AI threshold, which is just a value. Well, both of these are just strings. Let's go into something a little bit more interesting. I have this little trivia key value that I've been playing with. And so you could see there's questions, there's answers. I could filter these however I want, and look at the JSON and everything like that. So super helpful, especially when you're wanting to look for a particular key or value, you know, look at its history. You can do, you know, look at all this stuff live. It's very, very useful, and you don't necessarily have to reach for the NATS CLI. So especially if you're working in a team where like maybe you're the NATS pro and everybody else is still trying to figure this out, this could be a really, really cool tool for this. So I really like it. I like what the team's done here, and I'm looking forward to like more updates.
Yeah, I think that's definitely one of those areas where try it out, give us feedback, because we're open, we're new. All of this we're developing right now and pushing it out, and we're definitely open to suggestions, feedback, what works, what doesn't work, what you want to see. Yeah, this is a great time to be involved in sort of the future of how these things are looking and working. So yeah.
Awesome. For those of us who are joining us on YouTube and Twitch, Kbray on Twitch, Bro Nifty on Twitch, thank you for the thanks. We you know, if this stuff is helpful, let us know. I like the idea of showing up every week and just chatting about stuff, but do let me know if there's particular subjects, you know, you like to chat about in this format where it's a little bit more fast and loose than my other kind of talks or videos. Again, Alexander from YouTube, thanks for asking that question. Sheffy from YouTube, let me see if I can just paste this into Excalibur so everybody can kind of see the question real quick. Let's see. Okay. Another question that kind of came in from YouTube from Sheffy says, using the C# client NuGet package, can I generate N keys and create NATS accounts at runtime? That's a great question. Zia, if you are in the chat, I can confirm. I know that we have libraries in JavaScript and in Go that are respectively called like N keys or you know, the JWT libraries in those respective languages. I don't know if we have that in C# yet, or .NET yet. That would be awesome if we did, but I would have to confirm with the team there. So Zia, if you are hanging out, do let us know if that's something that's in there. Otherwise, I'll have to look. Great question.
Yeah, one thing I would say just with that, one thing to realize that N keys under the hood are just, you know, 25519 keys with a prefix and a CRC, kind of a CRC footer. So one thing that I had to do in a past project, we were kind of mapping, you know, keys and things, but we had the 25519 keys, but we didn't have N keys. Is you can construct an N key from an actual just regular key. So that's just something that I would throw out there. Is they're not magical necessarily. They are kind of a standard key format with just a little bit of things tacked on. So it's possible to generate them by hand. Obviously not necessarily recommended, but if you look at either the Go or the JS library and how that's being done, it's pretty straightforward. So
yep. Yeah. And it's the same thing with the JOT, right? These are all open standards essentially, with some decoration. So essentially our JOT libraries is standard JOTs with standard, you know, signatures, but the obviously what the JOT library handles is all of the custom NATS based claims that exist on those JOTs. So like it wouldn't be a huge amount of effort and would probably be very valuable to the community to build these in various languages. If you know, that sounds like a fun project, a fun, you know, day or weekend project for you to work on, that would be awesome. But yeah, so I don't know if we have support in it yet. That'd be awesome if we did, but if we don't, it's an opportunity for a cool, you know, high profile project. So very, very good question there. Really appreciate those questions coming in. Okay, let's hop in. And again, if you are still joining us on Zoom, feel free to jump in and ask any questions, but I'm gonna go back to our agenda. We'll show off something really cool. For those of you who kind of stuck around, I'm gonna show off a really cool little preview, and we'll chat about, you know, how we may integrate this into future products or like where we might take this. But we have this really cool little preview, and I'll kind of post the URL here. It's right now it's called nats-sh dot, it's on Vercel.app. And this is a preview. We'll eventually like maybe officially support this, but we have NATS running inside of the browser now via WASM. And so a lot of the WASM stuff for Golang has gotten really good to the point where we can now run a NATS server and a NATS client inside of the browser. So you can, you know, show people NATS or play with NATS without having to install it. And eventually we'll be integrating this both into our documentation as well as an actual tool like inside of Synadia Cloud, where you might be, you know, inside of a certain user context or things like that, and you just want to, you know, test out that the permissions are working correctly. You can do so really quickly with the NATS CLI. And so I just type NATS here. And what this does is it, you know, pulls down the binaries, the actual WASM binaries, and starts running them. It starts an internal NAT server for you. And I have a subset of these commands that I can use. We're going to eventually support more commands here. But the idea is I can, you know, split these windows up, and I could say a NATS sub hello, and I can say NATS pub hello, you know, count, let's see, hi, count 1000, and you can see that this all works. And the cool part is we're not actually doing any networking here. This is all happening in process locally inside of a shared worker. And so I can even do this in multiple tabs, and it will, you know, still talk with that NAT server. So it's going to be a really fun way for us to kind of explore how to continue to teach NATS, since in my experience, showing people the NATS CLI really gets them to understand NATS well. But we'd love your feedback on this and maybe some ideas. And I think shortly here, maybe within the next 1 or 2 weeks, we'll be able to have maybe an open source version of this that people can play with and contribute to. And I know, Seth, when I was showing this to you earlier, you got really excited because you're like, I want to put this in Synadia Cloud.
Oh
Right?
yeah, no, I know when you posted that internally, the video about what you were working on, pretty much all of us on the cloud team were like, oh my gosh, we need to get that, because we've thought that would be super helpful, right? Like embedded in cloud or in platform, being able to say, hey, I'm connected to this system, you know, this cluster. I just want to interact with it. Why do I have to go out to the shell and get the NATS CLI and download my user creds? Why can't I just say, you know, click a button and have it load a virtual shell for me? So yeah, this is huge. This is actually something that I'm poking at and playing around with right now. So yeah, love it. It will. I'm fairly confident in saying that it will, in some way, shape, or form, make it into platform and cloud. And yeah, hopefully sooner rather than later. But we're definitely excited about it. And I think, like you said too, from the learning standpoint as well, I know there's other teams in Synadia that are looking at it from just like a standpoint of how can we make NATS and you know, interacting with NATS more approachable and easier to learn. And this is a huge part of that as well. So yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Would love to get this inside of more tools, documentation, stuff like that. And we want to make this more of a public utility for folks too. So like, you know, you can take this website, you can, you know, give it a prompt and send it as a link to somebody, or you can embed it in your own blog posts, things like that. So if anybody has ideas, if you're writing content, and you want to have kind of like embeddable NATS documentation, or, you know, embeddable interactive examples, this might be a really good way to kind of go about doing it. Feel free to send your ideas our way. Hop into our community Slack or hop into these videos and let us know. Okay, I'm going to hop on and ask or answer some more questions. We do have one that came from YouTube. So let me go ahead and just copy paste this when I get the, okay. Jay asks, is it possible to have single management account, which has total access to many customer accounts, or does everything go in one account with separate users? That is a fantastic question. So for Synadia Cloud, you end up getting access to create as many accounts as you want, and that all exists kind of like on a team. If you're using Synadia platform, you kind of have like the whole hog access to all of that. And so even one of our customers that is using Synadia platform and control plane, that they are doing exactly this, that they have like these kind of customers of theirs that have their own accounts, or even maybe just their own users, and they're able to give them access to just that and kind of manage their like master account. And so we wanted to build these products as a way to like really truly support a platform where you can build a platform inside of your company. You can build a platform that operates also outside of your company, whether those are customers or partners or things like that. And so everything that you're seeing in Synadia Cloud, technically, you can buy Synadia platform and like build your own Synadia Cloud with it. I don't know if we have any licensing terms around that right now. But I mean, like but that's kind of the intent, right? Is like Synadia Cloud is our expression of how we would use Synadia platform. And we know that it's a familiar use case for folks who want to roll out more NATS to either support customers or support more teams internally. And that's the kind of way we want to be able to support it. So combining like the REST API and service accounts, you could really create a true like SaaS around NATS.
Yeah, I think that was one of the things we did with platform, was the idea of you have users that are tied to platform, and then you can be very fine grained on the types of permissions, the roles that you want to give those users, right? So you can have a user that has a NATS user in a particular account, and when they log in, all they can do is just go download the credentials for that particular user in that account. Or you can give them access to multiple accounts and they can do certain things in there. So you can definitely, from a broader level platform, allows you to give selective permissions to accounts and users, and ways to manage and interact with them. So it's definitely, designed to be kind of that larger, that larger sort of abstraction for managing access to your NATS cluster.
Awesome. All right, we're coming up on like about 2 minutes before we have to hop off, Mark. So if anybody has any burning questions, feel free to jump in and ask them. Dixon just asked, Seth, with what you were just talking about, were you talking about signing keys, or is that something different? Yeah,
that's something different. So so signing keys would be like when you're minting NATS users on an account. So with Synadia platform and Synadia Cloud, you have users that are app users of cloud, and they can be given visibility to multiple accounts on a system. So it's not signing keys; it's a level of abstraction on like cloud or platform. So it's like when you log into platform, you can either see like Jeremy has up there, and I assume he's got his demo as default and his Rethink connectivity account. Those are all separate NATS accounts that are, would have their own signing keys, their own users, all of that. Then the NATS server understands those accounts, but his login has access across all of those. So yeah, that's the level of abstraction that we're talking about.
Awesome. Yep. So even in Synadia Cloud, you can have multiple accounts, and we price things out, some of these things out based off of accounts, but we also have kind of this, Synadia Cloud is actually pretty impressive with the way we do a lot of the pricing, is you have, and mine's kind of funky because I have a weird plan. So if you see 1,000%, that's, not quite there, but basically we pool a lot of our resources. So you can buy kind of one set of resources, and you can spread those out however you'd like across all of those different accounts. And so if you have multiple teams or multiple customers that you like to support, you could have like an account per, and we've designed it in a way where, we're okay with people having a lot of accounts, in this regard. So, we wanted to make sure that we supported that use case, really, really well in this regard. So, okay, great. If we don't have any more questions, I'll close with one thing Maurice has said about nats.sh. And again, if you're interested in nats.sh, do let us know. It would be cool to get more previews out, and it'll motivate me to me and Seth maybe to get it over the finish line. But yeah, Maurice said embedded and debuggable step-through examples in the docs using NATS.sh would be so cool. That's the plan. NATS.io website, nats.sh, NATS by example, rather than just having like, oh, here's the code you could paste into your terminal. I want to be able to have people just like say, here's the terminal command, now like click run or hit enter and watch it go. So that's the hope there. And I think we can maybe get it there sooner rather than later. I think that'd be really, really neat. All right. Well, if we have no more questions, I think we're going to sign off for today. Again, we do this every single week. So if you're tuning in, on any of the socials, you can you could hang out with us there. You can also follow the link below if you're on socials to our Zoom event. So you could sign up and get emailed and get reminders for when we're going live with all this stuff. And then if you are in Zoom, you're more likely to be able to get your questions answered because that's what I'm looking at the most. And you could raise your hand and maybe even I'll pull some more folks on stage to chat about stuff. So like I said, we'll do this every week at the same time, and we'll talk more about NATS next week. So thanks everybody for joining us. Thank you, Seth, for offering your insight and talking with us about Synadia Cloud and Synadia Platform. Super, super insightful, and we'll see everybody next week. Thanks, guys.
Cheers.
Bye.